But look, let's move on, because there was also a more nefarious reason being put forward for the fail of the voice, and our leaders were getting dangerously close to denying the result of the referendum by pushing it. Here is Anthony Albanese blaming misinformation for the referendum loss.
We've had, including in outlets represented in this room, discussions about a whole range of things that were nothing to do with what was on the ballot paper tonight. So for many people, it became an issue in which they were receiving a range of information.
Misinformation has become a word which is carelessly wielded in arguments to stifle debate and muddy the waters. Why bother putting in the intellectual groundwork to formulate a counter-argument when you can simply dismiss your opponents as purveyors of misinformation? It is one of Labor's favourite tools in debate, and it exposes anyone using the term as being intellectually incapable of mounting a counter-argument. Now, make no mistake, misinformation exists, but most people tend to think of it as being doctored photos or AI-generated audio. Instead, it's lazily being used to describe arguments one side of politics just doesn't like. But this referendum, the media stood by while this disparaging and idiotic phrase crept into the public discourse.
We did all we could to ensure that the proposal was strong, but it is clear from the result that we were not able to reach you through that, and we were not able to reach you and cut through what has been the single largest misinformation campaign that this country has ever seen.
But we have seen a disgusting no campaign, a campaign that has been dishonest, that has lied to the Australian people.
One of the things that's crystal clear from the campaign itself is Peter Dutton is a master of misinformation, and it was a Trumpian campaign of misinformation that was based on fear and division.
Australians can see through this nonsense, and in my opinion, a huge own goal in the Yes campaign was the aggressive way in which it denied your right to debate. All around the country, Indigenous groups are making native title claims, but we were told it's misinformation to suggest The Voice could make a submission on this issue. No one believes that. We were told it was misinformation to link treaty to The Voice. But as soon as it failed, our leaders and Indigenous groups pushed for just that. Instead of providing a clear framework for what The Voice would be able to make submissions on, it left the issue open to interpretation. All Australians could do in that situation is use their eyes and ears to know exactly what types of topics the body would be dominated by. And for many Indigenous groups, they were not even told how they would get on The Voice, sparking concerns that more dominant tribes would swallow up spots and ostracise more small tribes. It is why in Tasmania, two leading Indigenous groups lobbied for a no vote, each fearing the other group would take the power and make the other one redundant. Now, is it misinformation to point out any of this? I've been very impressed by the analysis of Michelle Grattan, who wrote about this issue in The Conversation. She is a lone voice on the left in being extremely critical of Albanese for his failures on all of these points, and she also dismantles the misinformation argument. To blame lack of bipartisanship, mis- or disinformation and racism is kidding ourselves. The margin was too wide. To think Peter Dutton's support could have swung things is a very long stretch. The Conservatives would have been divided no matter what Dutton did. And yes, there was misleading information and conspiracy theories flying around, but it is insulting to suggest that so many voters were just duped. Now, Grattan even takes aim at Albanese's misinformation and disinformation legislation, arguing constitutional experts have warned this carries significant dangers for freedom of speech. In fighting one problem, we should beware of creating another. And polling expert Cos Samaras from Redbridge Group Australia went a step further and suggested that those pushing a conspiracy that misinformation lost the vote were doing so to avoid blame. He had 7 points on why this is the case, but we'll stick to my favourite 3. Why do some fixate on disinformation when digesting election results? 1, it avoids self-reflection. His 3rd point, it confirms societal bias that people who do not agree with you are stupid, especially poorer folk. And his final point, number 7, it helps with the sudden realisation that you belong to a minority. Be sceptical of any attempt to discredit the result on this vote. Professional journalists should know better than to disparage the integrity of our electoral system. But unfortunately, I fear this result will be used to push through dangerous misinformation laws so that Labor can take control of the conversation. Darren, let's go to you again. Clearly, misinformation is a real thing. I thought it was very dangerous how they were conflating this real problem of misinformation or real problem of abuse on social media with just a different opinion.
Agree. I mean, the Yes campaign was extremely well funded, more well funded than the No campaign. They had a long lead up to plan for this. They had the support of corporate Australia, celebrities, the business world, and so there was no shortage of really good, strong support from all sectors of society. I felt, on the whole, the media did a fairly good job all around of explaining the different issues, but it was ultimately incumbent on the Yes campaign to explain what they were actually proposing, because they put up the proposal, or that side of politics did, and they failed to do that. And I think many voters just felt there was a lack of detail, and they became more and more suspicious about it as we got closer to polling day, and ultimately voted in very, very big numbers across the country, not just in regional areas, but in cities as well, and all of the states against the proposal.
Tim Blair, your thoughts on misinformation?
It's interesting, isn't it, that the various Yes campaigners are fighting all this misinformation and disgusting, campaign from the No. They're finding out about this after the vote. Now, one thing you want during a debate, when the issue is live, you want your opponent to say things that are provably and obviously wrong, so you can dismantle them. You can make them look like idiots. Apparently, these arguments were out there, but the Yes campaigners only found out about them after everyone had handed in their ballots, which is kind of ridiculous. As well, I think Darren touched on this point, is that the word misinformation is now synonymous in certain political minds with disagreement. So, for example, if just to give a hypothetical example of how this might work in an Albanese sort of future with potential legislation being passed, if there's an argument being floated by the left that we should triple, say, unemployment benefits, and an opposing view is offered that this might, increase inflation, or it might provide disincentives to finding employment. Well, no, that'd be disinformation, because you're saying that this proposal is bad. You're disagreeing with the proposal. The proposal is a good proposal. To go beyond that, introduce. We're not talking about inflation. We're not talking about employment. We're talking about trebling unemployment benefits. Misinformation. I think that's where this is going, and we've got to massively oppose any kind of. This is a free speech deal, really, at its essence, and it can't be allowed to proceed beyond this point.
Definitely. A lot of fact checks that I read actually will say that exact scenario, and they'll say, well, you can't say this legislation's bad because experts think it's good. And that's the level of fact checking. It's a very common tactic. You get a couple of experts that agree with it, and then you say the whole thing's redundant in terms of a criticism.
Yeah. I think that, the one thing now that everyone should get behind is as Jacinta Price said, bringing Indigenous Australians into the fabric of the nation is a message that mainstream Australian voters will get behind, and they would they do very well to really look at her, cause for a bipartisan effort and get behind.
She was a good operator. She's definitely got a bright future.